everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so welcome to our travel agency that we are not traveling this year because of COVID again, but I want to tell you about an excursion I recently heard about where someone was on some water. Now, some people don't like getting wet. I am one of those people. I grew up in Mexico, in the desert, where sometimes we waited like days for water to come. So we were like not showering, we were being very conservative with our water, not doing dishes, we would wait until there were a lot before we did them, which is very opposite to what it's like living here, right? Where we have a giant pool of water right next door. And I mean, Kosciuszko County is a county of lakes, right?
You drink that,
But you can still purify. We didn't even have water to purify, right? Like rain didn't fall for weeks at a time, and that meant that the city didn't have any water to send us. So we just sort of waited it out until water came. So I am not the biggest fan of water. In fact, if I didn't have to jump in a lake, I would be totally fine if I never had to do that again. Which means that something like snorkeling really isn't my thing. Has anyone been snorkeling before? Max has?
In a pool with a snorkel.
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah.
the best time to
But you kind of understand what it's like, right? You have like the little tube, you're able to put your head underwater, and when you're snorkeling out in the wild, you can get down and like see all of the fish and the, I was gonna say algae, that's what we have here, but the coral and the sharks and stuff, which I will put my mask on to bring it around. I actually was thinking about this, and my roommate who goes down to Florida once in a while, he gave me, for Christmas, this is such a weird Christmas gift, but he gave me a bottle of shark's tooth, so I was gonna show you guys. Have you guys ever seen shark's teeth before? They're pretty sweet. And sharks have hundreds and hundreds of teeth, and so they just sort of like fall out.
And I want that. If you don't like it, I'll take it.
Well, it came in handy today, didn't it? But because they have so many teeth, they just sort of fall out and you kind of collect them just like little rocks. So these are the kinds of things you would see if you went down to the beach.
I didn't know they were black. I thought they were white.
You thought shark's teeth were white?
Yeah.
I actually didn't ever think about that. But there's just hundreds of them. He just walks around and collects them on the beach. It's so weird. They're kind of all shapes and sizes. But something that you can also do if you're like me and don't like water is that you can do what's called dry snorkeling. Anybody have an idea of what dry snorkeling could be? Sounds kind of weird, right? How can you snorkel when you're not in water? What do you think?
Swimming in sand.
Swimming in sand. No, actually they have boats that have glass bottoms on them, which means that as you're kind of on a motorboat or sailboat or whatever it is, you can actually see everything that's happening while you're nice and dry and comfortable on the boat. Yes.
At Mississippi, the Cabela's that they have a pyramid and it's made completely out of glass. And then they have a deck you can walk on that's glass, so you can like look down at the city. It's like 300 feet tall.
Oh man, that is very scary.
And then we walked out there and we saw one plate that was actually cracked, and we're like, and then we actually like just went right inside and we're like, done.
Never again. So if you were in one of these boats and like looking at the water underneath you, it would kind of feel like you were walking on water, right?
Yeah.
Like, that would be pretty crazy. So today's story is a little bit like, I mean, it's better than dry snorkeling because it was actually walking on water. So there are 3 reasons Jesus performed miracles in the Gospels. Can anyone remember one of them? What was one of the 3 reasons that Jesus performed miracles?
The eternally bleeding woman.
No, not one of the miracles.
That was a miracle.
Remember
But do you remember why he did that?
We
Why?
have this thing we're supposed to remember all month.
The big picture.
The big picture question, yeah, why did Jesus perform miracles?
Oh, okay.
Yes, Hannah.
To show God's love.
Yes, to show God, well, that
To show
actually
God's
figured
glory.
out was kind of 2 answers at the same time. Yeah, he did that to show people that he cared for them. One example was last week. Who remembers what we talked about last week?
I wasn't here last week.
Oh my word. I was here last week.
Jesus fed the 5,000 men.
Right, Jesus fed the 5,000. Now that was kind of to show God's glory, but it was more to help someone because they were hungry, they hadn't eaten all day, and he cared for their physical bodies by providing food for them. So that was one. Anybody remember what the other 2 have to do with?
show God's glory. You just said to show God's glory.
Yes, to show God's glory and to show that
He cares for people.
Right.
that was the first one, and to show that He is God. Okay, so the three reasons are to show that He is God, to show God's glory through Him, and to show that He cares about people. So, let's see. So we talked about the feeding the 5,000, which was showing that He cared for people. And then what was the last lake story that we heard, the last one about the Sea of Galilee? Who remembers that story? What was that one about?
Was it last week?
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I was here. The Sea of Galilee.
What happened on the Sea of Galilee?
They were on the boat, and
Yep.
Jesus fell asleep, and they were in the middle of a big storm, and they woke up Jesus and calmed the storm.
Exactly. So which one of those three things was Jesus showing in that moment, do you think?
To show that He was
To
God.
show that He was God, right? That He had power over nature. So this sort of story is kind of similar, but in a very cool, different way. So our story actually is just a continuation of what we talked about last week. So last week, as Deegan said, Jesus had been teaching all day. He had been teaching 5,000 men, probably close to 10,000 people all day about His parables. So in the Bible, we actually have a list of a selection of the parables that Jesus was telling. So after that whole day of teaching, He was exhausted. Now, I'm an introvert, right? You guys know what introverted means? It means that you get, your energy gets used up by being with people, and you get recharged by being alone. So after all day with 10,000 people, I think I would be pretty tired. Anybody else feel that way? Yeah, we have a few introverts in the room for sure. I know some of us are extroverts for sure.
Me with my
I
brother
get
is
energy
kind of
from
like
being
being
around
around
people.
You get energy from being around people? Okay, you're an extrovert then
kind
for
of
sure.
like being 10,000 people. It's pretty annoying.
Yes, I would be exhausted. So Jesus did what a wise introvert would do, and He said, okay, everybody go home. So He sent all 5,000 people home, 10,000 people home. He told His disciples, listen, I love you guys, but I need some time. So He said, okay, you guys get in your boat and go across the sea back home, across the Sea of Galilee. Meanwhile, He went up into the mountains to pray with God. So the way that He rejuvenated His spirit was by spending time with the Lord, which is hopefully something we can learn about today. So on the mountain, the disciples are rowing or sailing back across the sea. So that was at the end of the day. Now, the Sea of Galilee is known for these very sudden, sort of crazy storms that happen all at once. Did we ever find out where the Sea of Galilee was on this map?
Yeah,
Would
oil one.
you like to help me hold this up real quick?
See Galilee. Yep.
Yep, right there. So it's not a very big. So this is a big sea, right? Like this is like countries large. This is more. I mean, it's definitely bigger than Winona Lake, but it was more like when we think about it, like that's kind of more what it was like. So this is about this size. We'll leave it up there until it falls down. And so I'm sure the disciples knew that things were going to happen, but all of a sudden there's a storm that comes in, okay? And so it's not as bad as the last one where they were afraid they were going to die. It wasn't that bad, but they were exhausted. They were so tired. So they were rowing and rowing and rowing and not getting very far. And that happened all night. I mean, oh man, I would be exhausted after trying to row a boat across the sea all night and not get anywhere. And so towards the end of the night, maybe like the dawn is starting to glow in the morning, they see what might be a ghost walking across the water towards them. And does anybody like scary movies? I am not. Well, I hate scary movies.
No.
They scare me too much. I don't like watching them.
I kind of.
No, we kind of do.
I love it.
Okay, so some of us like scary movies. After being tired all day, after rowing all night, and seeing what looks like a ghost walking across the waves towards me, I would be, nope. I think I would be hallucinating something like
Yeah,
I
I
need to go to
jumped in
bed.
water.
Oh man, that would be so scary.
I could do it.
So unsurprisingly, the disciples were terrified. Okay.
There it goes.
Right there she goes.
Okay. Unsurprisingly, the disciples were terrified. They were so scared. It's not normal to see someone walking across the water, right? I've never seen that happen, and I can't imagine that anyone else has either.
I can.
And so Jesus, being the very kind person that he didn't want his disciples to be afraid like that. So what he said was, courage, don't be afraid. And I think right then they pretty much knew who it was, right? Like they were pretty sure it was Jesus. They had spent years with him. They were pretty sure it was going to be him. So Peter, who was one of the disciples, I don't understand Peter because I am not a very brave person, but he said, Jesus, if it's really you, tell me to come to you. Tell me to walk across the water towards you. Now, is that a pretty bold thing to do, or
That's
what?
pretty dumb.
When we know that we can drown in the water, that's a pretty bold thing to say. But I think Peter knew something that we don't all the time. And so Jesus said, very simply, come. And so Peter is in his boat right here. And this is how I imagine it playing out, right? He's like, okay, put my row down. And he grabs the side of the boat. He swings his leg over. And I bet he didn't let go of the boat right at once, did he? Like, that was his safeguard. The boat was what he knew was keeping him afloat in this moment. Meanwhile, the waves are up big and tall and the lightning's flashing. And so I bet, but once he realized that he wasn't sinking, he probably had some confidence. He's like, okay,
He probably ran.
I'm standing and I can let go of the boat. So he sees Jesus way over there. He's like, okay, Jesus said I can walk towards him, I'm going to walk towards him. So he lets go of the boat, and because the waves are moving and stuff, I bet the boat started moving away. And when he turned around, he saw Jesus. And that's all he saw. The waves disappeared in his mind. The lightning didn't have any problems. It wasn't like blinding him or anything. All he saw was Jesus. And he started walking towards Jesus across the water, just like I'm walking across the ground. And I bet he walked for quite a while, right? He was just like, I see Jesus, I can't believe I'm walking on the water, but Jesus is making this happen, this is awesome. He's walking. And at a certain point, maybe he starts getting a little wet, right? Like, can you imagine? I mean, water's wet, right? So as you're walking and it's storming, if you've ever been on a boat, even when you're dry, the water's splashing up on you. Or if you've ever been like, oh, this is how much I don't like water. Oh, tubing, that's what I was trying to say. You've definitely gotten wet, right? It's fun, but you get wet. And so as Peter's walking, he's trying to keep his eyes on Jesus, but suddenly his clothes are getting a little damp and wet. The water's starting to splash him across the face. The lightning is really, really bright. And he starts getting distracted. And as he's walking, he realizes, oh man, I am standing on water. Like no one's supposed to. There's like hundreds of feet below me that's just nothing until I hit ground. That's not very fun. And his attention wavers. He stops focusing on Jesus. And he starts sinking. Just like a normal person does in water. And he freaks out. Of course he does. It's really scary when the boat's way over there and Jesus is way over there and you're in the middle of a lake and you're drowning. Like that's scary. I would hope that doesn't
I
Oh,
happen
would
to you.
scream. I'll just swim over.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know if he knew how to swim. I know I can't swim very well. I would be pretty scared. So he shouted out, "Lord, save me!" And Jesus was there, right there. He reached out his hand and said, grab it. So he grabbed his hand, pulled him up, and I bet together that they walked on the water back to the boat. The Bible doesn't say that, but that's how I'm imagining
I bet
it
he
play out.
carried him.
I don't know if he carried him. I don't know if they walked back, but they made their way back to the boat and hopped in. And Jesus said to him, Peter, you have so little faith. Why did you doubt? You saw me walking across the water. You saw yourself. You knew that you were walking across the water. Why did you doubt? And as soon as they got back into the boat, the wind died down, the waves rested again, and they came home. And all of the disciples, they fell down on their knees and said, Jesus, you truly are the Son of God. Because they saw that Jesus was God, right? That he could control nature, just like he did 2 weeks ago, and probably a little longer than that in their time. But he saw that he could control the water and the weather. So I was thinking about that in terms of my own life, right? And how often, sometimes my spiritual life is just like Peter when I get started out, right? I have all these things that are worries, but that I know will keep me safe, right? Maybe for you it's parents. For me it's having money in my bank account. Maybe for you it's your good grades. Maybe for me it's that my work is going well. Those are all normal, healthy safeguards that we have just from being people. Sometimes things do go well in our lives. That's like Peter in his boat. He has everything he needs to keep him safe. But Jesus calls us to do more than that. He asks us to have total faith in him, step out of that boat into the raging water, keep our eyes on Jesus, and walk towards him in faith. And too often, like Peter, instead of keeping our eyes on Jesus, we get distracted. Peter was distracted by what? What was Peter distracted by? By the water, by lightning, by the storm, yeah, the thunder, everything. It was such a, like, storms are not quiet, right? So he was very distracted by it. And what do we get distracted by in our daily lives? Brothers and sisters. Sometimes friendships are hard, yes. Playing, yeah. For you guys, it might be video games. For me, it might be video games. I don't know. I'm not good at video games. But for some people, maybe it's school is hard, and that's a distraction. Maybe for me, work is really hard. What about you guys? Television, yeah, what a distraction, right? What a way to spend so much time. That's not to say television is bad on its own, but when it becomes a total distraction from our focus on Jesus, then that really becomes a problem. Begin, what were you going to say?
Books can sometimes distract you.
Books can definitely be a distraction, right? They're awesome. Books, reading is so much fun, but sometimes we have to set aside our fun books and read the Bible, which actually I've been reading the Old Testament, and has some crazy stuff in there. It's really fun. Okay, Hannah.
I get distracted by my books too.
Yeah.
Like I lose track of time on what time I'm reading.
Exactly.
And then when I finally looked up, I'm at chapter 40.
Which, again, books are not inherently bad. There's nothing necessarily wrong with reading books. But if they are a distraction from us, and they are our personal safeguard for how we feel like we should be approaching Jesus, that's when it becomes a problem. So, that is what Jesus asks us to do, right? This is a really great example of a really visual example of the way that we can have faith and trust in Jesus in our normal lives. So maybe that's trusting Jesus. What can we trust Jesus with? I would say everything, but specifically in your lives, what do you think that you can trust Jesus with this week?
Bible.